On that note, we brought up Throne of Liberty and Ashes of Creation, especially as it relates to trust. And I see some awesome comments in chat as well. So we'll jump into those in just a little bit. But for Throne of Liberty, here's the interesting thing that's going on. Like today, we learned that Amazon is having its internal alpha test. But when we contrast Throne of Liberty to Ashes of Creation, we are looking at an interesting case study of two different games and how they're proceeding to communicate. We roughly know very little about Throne of Liberty. Like when it comes to what it is, I feel like I know a ton about Ashes of Creation. And the devs in their latest live stream have confirmed that Ashes Alpha 2, which a lot of people are expecting this year, might not make it this year. It might actually shift to 2024, which from an alpha perspective, I was thinking this game out, Ashes would probably be a 2025 game. That might no longer be the case. It might be a 2026 game. Do you think the marketing is going to end up cannibalizing everything that Ashes is set to be unique? And then obviously, what do you think about Throne of Liberty, getting ready to launch as well? Like, where do you fall?
The longer Ashes takes to release a product, the better that product has to be. And the problem is that if they had announced Ashes of Creation was coming out the day after people even found out what it was, the expectations from a lot of gamers would have been like, what the hell is it? So it would have been set at like a 1%. But that is slowly climbing. And there's going to come a point, and it'll vary by gamer, but there's going to come a point when the game has to be over 100% good, meaning it has to be the greatest game of all time and then some. It has to not just defy expectations, it has to introduce you to new expectations that you didn't even think of and then defy those. And like there will come a point where it is just so close to infinity that it wouldn't matter if they had a smooth launch with no queues, all working content, perfectly balanced with a good patch cadence. It won't matter because we will have tied so many of our hopes and dreams to it by that point that people will still find a reason to be angry because they will have felt stretched over just years. And that's not going to be what's happened. It's a brand new studio. It's not going to be a smooth launch. There's going to be so much hype around it. It's going to get hit with 2 million concurrents that opening hour. And there's not a company in the world that can make 2 million concurrents a flawless experience. So like, I'm saying, even if it was perfect, there would be people that find a reason to be upset, and it won't be perfect. And it won't be allowed to have the same amount of problems that we would traditionally cut another game. Larry Czar's game is available for demo today. Mm-hmm. And I hope people have a blast. Bellular and his team released their game not all that long ago, and the reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. That doesn't mean those were flawless games, but they also had substantially less hype around them than Ashes. And so people could say, hey, I have some feedback, and the devs could respond on that. It didn't immediately have to be, you lied to me for 4 years or whatever the development cycle ends up being. Mm. I don't know how long Ashes has been. It feels like it's been 4 years already.
Yeah, I think according to the Kickstarter, it was actually, that's why a lot of people were like die on the hill that the game is coming out in 2020. It's because I believe that according to Kickstarter, the game is going to launch in 2020. And it's like, I don't see that happening. Like, let's add a couple of years to that. And I just continue to been adding years to it. Now, chat saying, go ahead.
We joked that it would save our marriage, but I think Fido's right. Like at this point, it needs to like undivorce my parents. It needs to bring back my childhood dog. Like it's just going to get bigger.
Gotta be a country song, like one of the happy ones. The chat's asking, how much do we like? How do we know more about Ashes than Throne of Liberty? Neither have a game has produced a product yet. Well, that's like I wouldn't talk about actually that one game has launched and the other hasn't. I'm talking about in terms of gameplay footage in and of itself. Like we've only seen trailers for Throne. Like the people who've played it are on like severe NDA lockdown, local testing only. It is like, to get a leak and to get some information, you have a lot of people speculating wildly about Throne. Ashes, we've seen people actually play that game, and we know that it's a while off. I feel like I could tell you what Ashes is, while with Throne of Liberty, if you ask me if it's action combat or tab targeting, I'd say jury's out. People believe different things about what kind of combat system it is. Now, whether that works out in their favor, we won't know until the game launches. One of the things we've seen in terms of video game marketing is we've seen some trends of games like, and you can play it now, as opposed to here's the information, to letting people talk and speculate and having a narrative set that is set by social media. And so when it comes down to it, if Throne of Liberty is a good game, it like that's obviously the only rule that you need. But it will be interesting to see it actually get to a chance where you're actively playing it and learning more about it as you play it, as opposed to being like a game that you've seen this play out, and they're running the risk of you've seen how it changed. And so they've said something like Ashes has said a lot of things. There's a lot of public statements about what that game is and what it will do. And there's no guarantee that any of that will launch. And I think that automatically starts having you lose points as opposed to like earning points of what it did right. What do you think, Chris?
I think by the time we know as much about Throne as we do about Ashes, it will be in the same spot. Like, I think it's just a different point in the life cycle. Like our grandparents' generation sometimes says that like our parents' generation were just a bunch of like slackers and hippies and people that wanted to just hug trees and didn't understand the reality of the world. And then that group aged into being the ones in charge. And now they're saying that our generation is a bunch of slackers and hippies and just want to hug trees and don't know how the world really works. And as you and I, shift into that kind of mid 30s to mid 40s time frame and start to be the ones where like I have friends who are starting to have substantial roles in companies and in local leadership, and some of them are starting to say things they've never said before, like I might run for political office one day, just at like the community level. It's like that's how it starts. And like we're getting to that point where our generation is starting to be slowly a little more represented. I'm starting to see them look at the generation behind us and say they're just a bunch of slackers and hippies and just want to hug trees. And it's like, so like the MMO lifecycle is the exact same thing. There is this release that there is theoretically an MMO coming out, and we don't know anything about the studio or the publisher or the monetization or anything. And everybody's like, oh my God, that's going to be the game that finally gets it right and understands that you have to care about players and you have to create this great dev environment, and that it can't just be about money, you greedy, selfish jerks. And then as we slowly learn about it, they realize, well, they're just compromising and they just want money, and they're just looking to release a product even if it's not fully ready. And then it just slowly degrades. And so we're talking about Throne of Liberty now, but I feel like we could play this exact same video back for the Riot MMO. And then and then there's probably another one on the horizon today. Put any 3 words in order. Somebody's made that as an MMO. And so the Coffee Muffin Bowl is the next MMO on the horizon, and it's going to be published by, it's going to be self-published as a Kickstarter, and people are already ready. Like I just made that up, and there's already a Kickstarter, and people are already sure that it's going to be the greatest game of all time. But the moment that we find out that one is tab target or action combat or first-person shooter or something like that, like Coffee Muffin Bowl's dead. We got to find the next thing now. Like it's trash. It's trash. And so like, that's where I see Throne of Liberty. That's why anytime we have these conversations, like I'm not the hype guy, because I don't get enough joy out of the feeling of the unknown to make up for all the cynicism from just years and years and years of finding out that every game is just a game. And I don't mean that as like, well, then why even play them? I think just a game is a perfectly valid target. Like when I log into a game, I just want it to be a game. I'm not looking for it to fix a plumbing leak in my house. Like I just want it to be a game. So like I'm okay with that, but it means that I'm a little bit jealous that I don't get to have these amazing highs that everybody else has. So like I think Throne of Liberty is exactly where Ashes is, assuming they choose to communicate just as much and that they take just as long to produce literally nothing. Like if you sit there, like Ashes is a question of like, what if I communicated all the time and then released nothing? Like now we know. People are eventually going to get mad.